If you've never seen the Asian jumping worm, count yourself lucky, but be warned. These guys are invasive, destructive, and spreading across the United States. They don't need a mate. One jumping worm can lead to thousands in just one season. They have a telltale band around closer to their head that is flush with their body, and it is not saddled. And that is how you know it is a jumping worm, other than the fact that they act crazy when you touch them. They wriggle around and they jump, although this late in the season, they're acting pretty docile, but you can still tell based on their appearance. If you have these guys, you need to act. Mine were introduced to my garden 3 years ago in a delivery of premium compost. I got it delivered in bulk. I think I got 13 yards of it delivered from a very reputable nursery that just must not have heat treated their compost before delivering it. And it will be an ongoing treatment remedy in your garden because you're never going to get rid of all of them. There's just no way. And now the entire upper half of my garden is infested with these guys. And they are incredibly destructive. So let's go down, and I'm going to be testing out some mustard powder that I got in my Azure Standard order this month. It is supposed to irritate them enough that they will rise to the surface of the soil, so you can easily hand pick them, which is the best method of controlling them other than solarizing in the spring and trying to kill off the cocoons and the eggs. So let's head down to the garden and see what we can do about these buggers. This just came in my Azure Standard order. I bought a whole lot of these 1 pound bags of organic mustard seed powder. And my watering can here is a 2-gallon container. So we're going to do 2/3 of a cup in here. My new best friend. Let those bubbles die down for just a minute because our water is not up to the top. We're probably about here. Now these worms live in the top few inches of the soil, the leaf litter and the upper layers of the soil. They do not burrow deep like other types of worms, though they can go down if they feel they need to. Asian jumping worms hitchhiked in with imported plants and soil. In the late 1800s or early 1900s, they were first documented in the northeastern United States. In 2013, they were confirmed in Wisconsin, which kickstarted more scientific attention. But honestly, there really isn't that much available even today. As of 2021, there are confirmed presence in at least 15 states, though there are other reports showing that they're in 34 to 38 states and parts of Canada. Currently, they span the Northeast, the Midwest, the South, and even some Northwest areas of the United States. They can spread easily. They spread through compost, mulch, potted plants, landscape materials, even leaf collection programs, which is why I no longer bring in any garden materials unless I am positive it has been heat treated. That's a juvenile. Hatched this probably midsummer recently. I just saw the soil moving right here. Now I did go through these beds in August and I hand picked them and I got about 100 worms. Here's one. Now, they're not very lively. Younger worms often aren't as dramatic in their movements. They're smaller, they're less muscular, and they don't always display the same vigorous thrashing. And as worms reach maturity and begin forming cocoons, their energy levels dip. And as I mentioned, August and September is prime cocoon laying season for them. So research does note that in later summer, the adults are less active as they transition their resources into egg and cocoon production. So in early summer, you usually see very vigorous juveniles moving quickly, and by late August and September, the adults are nearing the end of their life cycle, but they still lay cocoons. Even though their activity level is declining, their goal is to push out as many of those cocoon and eggs as possible. So normally these worms thrash and jump like crazy when they're disturbed, but today most of mine are sluggish, which is really a sign of the season. So by late summer, the adults are reaching the end of their life cycle. They're not jumping as wildly, but they're still dangerous because they're laying hundreds of cocoons that will hatch next spring. See the soil? It's like coffee grounds. Not good, not good at all. The plants can't even stand up. There's no soil structure to help them stay up. So let's see if we can get some out of here. They might be further down in the soil because they can burrow themselves, in which case this mustard treatment is not going to irritate them. It's not even going to touch them if they're farther down. But more often than not, they're right at the surface level of the soil. When I took the boards off of my newly planted carrots, there were no carrots, but there were a whole bunch of worms just on top of the soil underneath the board. Oh, I see one. I see movement anyway. There's one. There's another one right here. So we've got two right here. And look how close they were to the surface. I'm just throwing them in a bucket for now. That's both of them. I can see more movement right here. Yep, there's another one. Normally they act crazy, jumping all over the place. There's another one here somewhere. Just because I can see the soil movement. There it is. We're supposed to get rain today, so tomorrow is probably a better day to do this when the soil is nice and wet. There's another one. But they're not very active, which tells me that's probably why they're not reacting to the mustard powder solution. So I'm just moving the soil and watching for movement of dirt, because they definitely don't like to be messed with. But can you see this soil? It's awful. It's just awful. It won't clump together. It's just coffee grounds. How to rectify that is just to keep adding organic material into the soil every year, but then they'll just come through and they'll eat all that organic material and you're left with this again. So this is just an ongoing battle. Here's one moving around right here. This guy right here. Oh, he just went back under. Let's see if we can get him. He was a bigger one, I think. Where the heck did he go? There he is. Oh yeah, he's a monster. He's a lot bigger. Look at that. And you can see his little band. I forget what they're called. It starts with a C. It is just all the way around complete and smooth. It's not raised and it's not saddled. That's a jumping worm. And the band is near the head. So I don't think I'm planting in this bed next year, at least not until later in the summer. I'm going to solarize this really well. These worms will not last the winter, but their cocoons and eggs will. It's that band around their body that holds their cocoons until they're ready to drop them, and they make the eggs themselves. They don't need a mate, which is why just one Asian jumping worm can lead into a massive problem in the garden. And as of right now, there is no cure for these. They have no known natural predator. In fact, they are a destroyer to the good worms that are in our gardens. They're a true monster in the garden. If you are battling these yourselves or you're interested in how I'm going to handle this and you want to stick with the journey, be sure that you're subscribed because they are my nemesis and I will be battling them until they are dead and gone, or I am. See, these top, inch or so is pretty dry at this point. So that's probably why they're down deeper. But let's dig a little and see what we can find. One jumping worm can start a major infestation. They don't lay single eggs. They make little cocoons, and each cocoon can hatch a handful or up to 20 worms. And since those will mature in just 2 to 3 months, it's possible to have 2 full generations in one growing season. That's how quickly a handful of worms can turn into thousands. They mature in 60 to 120 days, and they often produce 2 generations per year, and they can reproduce without mating. So 1 worm is all it takes. They do not need a mate. Here's why even a few jumping worms can turn into a complete nightmare. 1 worm doesn't just make a handful of babies. 1 worm can produce dozens of cocoons throughout the season, sometimes up to or more than 50 in 1 year. 50 cocoons. And each cocoon can hatch anywhere from 2 to 20 worms. So 1 worm this year could mean 500 worms next year. And again, they don't need a mate. 1 single worm can create an entire infestation. That's some scary shit right there. When I got that delivery of compost, I was so excited because I saw how many worms were in it. I had never heard of Asian jumping worms, never even crossed my mind that worms could be bad. And I was so careful using a shovel to transfer the load. It got dumped on my side driveway. And FYI, half of it is still sitting there 3 years later because once I realized what these were, once I looked into what these worms, these crazy worms were, I was floored. I was devastated. And that compost is still sitting in my driveway. Anyway, I was so excited at first when I saw how rich this compost was with all of these worms. And, if you don't know, you don't know. And that's part of the reason why I'm doing this video, because not all worms are good. Some worms are absolute nightmares. Unlike regular earthworms, these guys thrash, jump, and wiggle violently when disturbed, and they destroy soil structure. What's left behind is dry, coffee ground-like dirt that doesn't hold water, doesn't support soil life, and leaves plant roots struggling to thrive. Their natural spread is slow, but human-assisted movement from soil, tools, and plant material has enabled a rapid garden-to-garden and state-to-state spread. Once you've confirmed that you have the Asian jumping worms, you're going to want to hand pick them and just put them in a bucket of soapy water. Be very cautious about sharing compost or soil or even plants with other people because they spread so easily. Their eggs are inside of cocoons that mimic the look of dirt, so they're very hard to see. Anyway, I forgot what I was saying. So when I got the compost delivered, I was so careful transferring it, making sure I didn't kill any of the worms with the metal shovel and trying to make sure they all stayed with the soil. And I had already filled probably the first 6 beds in my upper garden when I really started taking a look at the behavior of these worms and went inside and did some research. I was utterly devastated when I realized what they were, and I stopped bringing the compost into my yard. And I don't even know what to do with it. I'm pretty sure all the worms have, they're not there anymore. It was sitting on blacktop driveway and it's been out there for 3 years now. They're probably in the front yard, which is not really landscaped. A total nightmare. I'm devastated by this, and I think that what I'm really going to have to do after I solarize the beds is I'm going to have to go in here with a screen, like a beach sand screen, like like when you were a kid, where the sand can fall through. Just because I know I'm missing so many worms as I'm doing this. Look at this guy. He's got more of the classic jumpiness, although he's still fairly subdued. But this is a big one. That's definitely an acrobatic adult. He fits across both of my hands. And they spread like wildfire. Oop, I just saw one. Hold on. Right there. I hate doing this because of the roots of the plants, but it can't be helped. Here's the really frustrating part. These worms actually leave behind soil that's technically nutrient rich. If you tested it in a lab, it would look like great fertilizer, but the problem is the texture. It turns into something like coffee grounds, loose, dry, unstable. Plant roots can't anchor, the soil doesn't hold water, and microbes don't get a chance to do their job. So all that nutrition is basically locked away where plants can't use it. It's like having a fridge full of food with the door glued shut. The nutrients are there, but your plants remain starving. That one's ready to reproduce. Now, this soil structure is not as bad as it could be. It does clump a little bit, but that's because I add organic matter to it every year. They're definitely in the asparagus bed. This is all coffee ground soil. That is devastating. Just devastating. I'm gonna have to start asparagus over again after I get rid of these as much as possible. Worms in buckets. I'll put some soapy water in here to get these guys handled. I think I should wash out my bucket so I can show you what they look like. Can you see those? All right, so here's one cleaned off. And you can see the band around towards the head is very smooth, and it's all the way around. There's no saddle break in it at all. It's also not raised. They're all the same. They look all the same. Some are just juveniles, some are adults. And those are Asian jumping worms. Got one trying to get out right here. And it looks like they can climb the sides of the bucket, so we definitely need to get some soapy water in there. So what can you do about these guys? You can hand pick them. You can try to get them to the surface using the mustard water. I did that the beginning of last year, at the beginning of the year before. Pick out as many as you can. Solarize your beds. Cover them with greenhouse plastic in late spring and early summer. Leave them on for a couple of weeks. The beds have to get to 104 degrees for 3 days straight in order to kill the eggs. The other thing you can do is scoop soil out and put it on a tarp, and then put clear soil or clear plastic over it. Water it down first so the soil is wet. Make sure you cap the sides so the worms can't escape, and just let the sun bake them. That's another way, but I don't know how I would do that with all of my beds. So I'm just gonna have to learn to live with these guys until I move. Yeah, devastating. I'm really upset at how these were introduced into my garden. I thought that I was building beautiful soil, and instead I was creating a haven for one of the most destructive and invasive creatures that gardeners have to deal with. If you have not had to deal with Asian jumping worms yet, count your stars, count your blessings, and then just beware. Don't bring in plants or soil that may have been contaminated. We've got a storm rolling in, so I'm gonna head inside and we'll wrap up on the deck. I am gonna fill this up with some sudsy water to take care of these guys. You have to. There is no way around it. You have to kill them. So gross, yes. Important, absolutely. If you garden for any length of time, you're going to be dealing with pests and problems like this. And so the most important thing I can do is share my experience and my knowledge in what I've learned over the last 3 years about Asian jumping worms, also known as snake worms or crazy worms. You do not want these. Do not bring in plants or garden amendments or anything that you are not 100% certain is free of these creatures. They're just a part of my life now and a part of my garden. And I'm going to have to figure out how to grow in somewhat of a communion with these guys. I will be solarizing my beds again in the spring and early summer of 2026, and we will continue to hand pick throughout each season. Ugh. Thank you so much for joining me for another edition of Sunday Fun Day, where I shared my experience so far with the Asian jumping worm. Next week, I promise we'll have something on the more funner side. My name is Kelly. You're at A Better Choice Homestead, and I do hope you come back and visit again soon.